Alright guys, welcome to VALORANT News. More roster drama going down with Edward Gaming confirming a major change yesterday. Team Vitality have confirmed what's happening with their roster and the departure of Sayf. Who could have possibly predicted the super team that came into the season actually started rather well would collapse in the spectacular fashion that they have done? What next for all of these players involved? What else is happening as well? Because going into the World Cup 100T might well be cooking in some practice scrims. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. This of course, the trophy for the Paper X guys. They box it up, they get on the plane, and they try to head out there, of course. Presumably, Singapore Airlines will probably not do the, the British Airways strategy. Joe talked about it and said, you know what to do. Of course, famously, that trophy that may or may not have got broken a couple of times back. But I thought this is pretty nice as well, actually. This is from the Straits Times, apparently a pretty major publication in Singapore. They actually put together a pretty cool article here about Paper X winning the trophy. So, yeah, thought that was pretty nice. And Sayf BB, he comes back from Toronto, turned on the stream and had about 70,000 viewers for it, which is pretty mega. Not sure what the peak was at one point in the stream at 70,000 viewers on Chinese TikTok, one of the few Chinese platforms that actually shows real-time viewership numbers, apparently. So, thought that was real cool. Obviously, a player who's gained a lot of fans in recent times, and many will be hoping that Wolves can make the return for the World Championship, because they're not going to be playing at the World Cup, as we know, because Wolves didn't qualify for that one, but they did, of course, qualify for Masters Toronto and did rather well, made it top 3, maybe thanks to the Heretics curse, maybe not. And Trinity, your thoughts on that? Just a couple of things. We did talk about some agent updates yesterday. This is one of them. Just some of the more notable things that have changed visually. And, I know that people will have their thoughts on this. I'm going to go full screen because you guys can pretty much just about see what is going on the right-hand side. But, you've got the older version on the left-hand side here, where if you've got the Cypher cam and it picks you up, okay, it's pretty obvious that it's picked you up. I mean, you guys can see that in the slow motion, it like throws the little white flash at you. And, I think everyone pretty much is like, okay, I got tagged. There's the camera, whatever, right? Like, it's not really rocket science. I think this is maybe the frustration for some. And we saw this a while ago, right, where the smokes had those particles added, which told you when they were going to fade. Lots of the pros basically said, look, is this really a decision that makes sense because it's reducing the skill gap to some degree? Now, you might argue, and it might be fair enough to argue, that this helps the newer player and doesn't really affect the top level. So, I get it. I can see the argument either way. The point is that now on the right-hand side, this is now the new animation, right? So when you get picked up by the camera, like, it will make it very, very obvious where you've been picked up for, what that looks like, right? So, yeah, this is how it looks now, and it's obviously an interesting change that people have been debating. There was also quite a few more buffs to Waylay. They made a few more changes to this new character. I don't know, people don't seem to be the biggest fan of this new character, to be fair. But yeah, just a couple of changes. Not anything like particularly dramatic, but just changing a couple of the timings, really. The unequipped time decrease from 1 second to 0.8, stuff like that anyway, for the various different things. And it saves you a little bit of time. And the saturate size increase is actually a pretty big deal, because, 10 meters to 12 meters might sound like much, might not sound like much. But when you look at it side by side, you can see that when you increase the radius by a little bit, it does make things look rather bigger. Happy birthday, Jorgamo, as well. I think it was his birthday, yesterday, as they confirmed. So we'll see if G2 can bounce back, of course, after a very challenging time out there in Toronto. And Kayak, he also lost in the finals with FNATIC, but it was his first real go at things. And we've seen, it's interesting, right? People say, oh, well, Paper X, they prove that you can stick together and still win, which sure is true, but also they did make the change Patman for Mindfreak. And Kayak joined FNATIC, and it's quite clear that, FNATIC did need at least something to change in order to give them that kind of revitalization spark, as it were. So as Kayak says, before this event, I didn't know how losing feels. I didn't lose many games in my career, but I'd never lost a grand final. After yesterday, I know this feeling and I hate it. First time in my life I got emotional about a video game. I didn't even know that Valorant and playing with this team means so much to me. I'm gonna make sure to put everything I have to be a better player in person for the rest of the season. Big thanks to my teammate. It's been a pleasure to work with you all so far. Really proud and happy with how we did this tournament, how we managed to stay in the hotel for 3 weeks, had an amazing time together. Want to thank them for stepping up and giving me confidence when I was not feeling well. Coming to this event, I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know how I'm going to perform, but I wanted to do my best and not think about the results at all. It worked out pretty well since I had zero stress and I was playing by a game. Got a lot of experience in this tourney, and I'm sure that I'm going to use it in future tournaments. I think I did good this event, although my expectations were a bit higher for this event. We have EWC soon, so quick reset, back to the grind, and as Boaster says in the replies, thought was kind of nice, our story is just beginning, boss man. So nice to see that Kayak and the rest of the guys were getting along well together. They've integrated him nicely into the team, and now Kayak knows, okay, that was good, but we've got to do better, right? And that's the next step. Some teams, though, that have bigger fish to fry are undoubtedly Vitality. Now, yesterday we saw that HFMI, or now he's going to be known as ZJC, it's kind of funny because when I looked on the VLR yesterday and I saw that they'd announced him as ZJC, as their new player name, I didn't even recognize that ZJC is actually a three-letter kind of, let's say, combination within his alphabet name. So it's just like when I saw ZJC, and this is what they confirm, right? They call him this, and they say that he used to be known as this. So they've basically made him choose a name. But it's just like, his name is such a mess that I was like, oh, maybe he's obviously changed it, but he's just taken a three-letter run from it. It's still not the best gamer tag I've ever seen in my life, but whatever, he is joining the team. There have also been some other rumours about potentially a new academy player that they were bringing up from their team, maybe to a substitute position. So, you know, they're trying to cook up with a few things. That GNE is going to be likely gone from the starting roster. We know that Simon, of course, long gone from Edward Gaming, and it's now ZJC who's in the team full time. Durka says, that's my login, lol. Valid reuse of joke. First one was a generational one-liner. So, you know, so Durka's getting into it in the replies. But speaking of Durka, really, we've got to talk about Vitality and the drama that's happened recently over there. The last couple of months have been chaos. I mean, it is remarkable to think about how well they started the year, because usually when these super teams are formed, right, the idea is, okay, Sayf is going to be in-game leader, captain of the team, calling the shots, obviously talked loads of trash on Liquid and all this stuff, and, you know, it looked like things were potentially going to go to plan for Sayf and the team. They brought in Durka, they brought in Les. It was like, wow, this is on paper a pretty crazy super team that is either going to crash and burn or they're going to fry. And the funny thing about this team is that they managed to do both, which is relatively rare. Like, when these super teams, quote unquote, are formed, you tend to find either they are actually really good, and if they are really good, they tend to be really good for some time, maybe a year or something. Or they're just terrible, and like the cultures clash, the chemistry doesn't work, you know, the in-game leader doesn't really work well just because he's maybe not a proper in-game leader, because sometimes that's how it goes when you form these super teams and you just chuck loads of talent together, which is kind of what happened here for Vitality. But as I say, they managed to do both. Like, they started well, and then everything just very swiftly collapsed. Sayf got into some drama, he was gone, they've made a couple of changes, and now they've confirmed that after nearly 2 years of victory, setbacks, growth and memories, today we say goodbye. So yeah, Sayf officially gone from the outfit. He steps back from competition as well, so he's not going to be coming back to the team for now, maybe not going to be coming back at all, who knows. Not sure that Sayf has commented on this. I tried to find his Twitter and it seems like it's all protected, so it doesn't really seem like that's happening, right? So, but yeah, Sayf is officially off the team after, as we look back at the matches for the season, I mean, look how well things started, of course, winning the kickoff against Liquid in the grand finals, you know, Sayf, Les, Durka, Kicks and Trex, it was all looking so promising at that point in the season. Then things at Bangkok swiftly fell apart, and since then it was, you know, pretty much a disaster, only beating the teams they absolutely should. So yeah, pretty much a disaster. They didn't make it to the World Cup either, losing to Gentomate. It was inevitable that something major had to give. Durka stays, Kicks stays, Les stays, but apart from that, everyone else is gone. So Sayf is now gone again, Trex is now gone, and they've brought in Kovac and Unfake. Unfake's going to be the IGLs, and that's their team again. You know, it's a mishmash of players in various different countries, but maybe this is the step in the right direction. And of course, as we know, Sayf got into a bit of drama, and I think he was even playing a bit of Counter-Strike on stream during Masters Toronto, which probably goes to show that, yeah, competing in Valorant again going forward is maybe not the immediate plan. So, yeah, they were getting some scrims underway. We can see it here. Of course, they've got Les and Kicks and Unfake and Durka, and Faded is one of their coaches in the lobby getting some practice in. So we'll see if that team turns out to be good or not. Just the other thing to to mention before we close out here is because the World Cup is on the horizon. Now, of course, there have been some talks, and understandably, about the future of the World Cup and whether it's all going to go ahead as planned, because the World Cup is set to begin right about here on the 8th of July, finishing on the 13th of July, and then just a day or so later, we are going to have the other regions get back underway for stage 2. China's actually already going to start before that, but the other regions will get underway shortly afterwards. So, yeah, this is what it's going to look like for EWC with the different brackets that they have, and we'll see all the teams get seeded, and I'm sure very shortly. But as we know, it's a little bit interesting over there in that part of the world right now. There's plenty of unrest. Saudi Arabia is not a million miles away from Iran, and as a result, people are suggesting, and there have been talks even over the last few days, of civilian flights getting cancelled and difficulty getting into the country, certainly if you're rerouting through Qatar, which is actually very common. Especially if you're coming over from the US, depending on some of the players, you may end up flying through Doha and then on to Riyadh. And that is something which seems to be a challenge right now. So if you get a direct flight to Saudi, maybe it's okay. From Europe, that'll probably be fine. From other countries, it may be more challenging. And, you know, due to airspace restrictions, I'm sure there are going to be delays and issues that these teams are going to have to think about. So that's for the time being. Things, of course, over time may change, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. But just to note, really, 100T, they are one of the interesting teams to keep an eye on going into the World Cup, because they did actually qualify for it and they were scrimming someone here and were up 19-2. So maybe they're peaking at the right time. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.